Yeah. Well, hello everybody. Welcome back. We're gathered together again to hear Mr. Cazares talk about one of the great projects in the world. $5.3 billion worth of moving dirt and channeling and water. Oh, I know. More or less, right? It's a several project actually. It's not much digging and diverting water to a different way. It always goes downhill. Isn't that right, Joe? But anyhow, it's a pleasure to have Joe here, Vice President with CH2M Hill. I'll let him tell you what that means. It is an odd name for a company. We have a relationship with CH2M Hill because when we won the contract to train all the Panamanian project managers to do this project, we partnered with them to do that. They brought the expertise, the product expertise, and we brought the academic project management, and we came together and formed what I think was a very powerful team, and trained 240 or 50 or some odd project managers in Panama to do this monster project. So, Joe, you got it.
Well, good afternoon. Is my mic on okay? Can you hear? Yeah. Okay, very good. So as Jim indicated, the relationship that CH2M Hill, myself, and the University of Texas Dallas goes back 2007 is when we actually joined forces together and to put a program together to train several of the managers from we used to call it the Panama Canal Authority. We have recently gone under a new branding of the canal. It's now the Canal de Panama. So they were getting confused with some products from other countries where ACP meant some other things. So we are now the Canal de Panama. But I have to say that I do give a lot of credit to the University of Texas Dallas, Jim Joyner and his team, to helping us actually secure the program management services for that, for the canal expansion. We did the training. I actually was involved in giving a class on program management and construction management. And several months later, as we competed with other talented companies, they selected us. So, so I thank the University of Texas Dallas and Jim and other folks who were involved. So one of the things is, as Jim indicated, CH2M Hill seems kind of a chemical company instead of a engineering company. The C and H and 2M Hill is the names of the founders that were involved in forming the company. A professor from University of Oregon and 3 of his graduate students came together, and that's how the name came together. Hill came after an acquisition of another company, basically a water company that we acquired along the way. And before I get started, a little about me. As indicated, I'm the Vice President and Director of CH2M Hill Panama. I'm also the Deputy Program Manager for the Panama Canal expansion, about $5.3 billion. And I'm also the locks construction manager, responsible for the $3.3 billion that's part of the $5.3 billion, which is the locks construction. Well, if I can figure out technology here, I think I press which button?
The one on the right.
The one on the right. Okay. Let me tell you a little bit about the contract. Right now, the Panama Canal Expansion Program is actually 35 plus contracts, okay? The biggest one is obviously the Panama Canal Expansion Locks project, which is $3.3 billion. The next largest one is what we call the PAC-4, which is part of the expansion, which is about, I think it's a little project about $300 million. So, and the rest of the projects vary from 10 million to about 100 million, but it's all integrated to where we have to have it all come together. So once we're done with the locks, that it all can flow together. The contract is based on a FIDIC contract. How many people know what FIDIC is? Oh, Well, of course. So it's the European version of the American way we do contracting, and it's not the same, but it basically is a kind of a contract. The reason the FIDIC was used was that we were trying to encourage international companies, and that's what we got. Basically, 48% of the consortium is called GROUP. 48% of that consortium is a Spanish firm called Cazares out of Spain. The other 48% is Improgil, an Italian firm. The other 3% is Jean de Nul of the Netherlands, and 1% is CUSA, which is the biggest company in Panama. So you kind of have a little bit of an international flavor. The contract, the way it's set up right now, is FIDIC-based with a tremendous input from the client. So it may not, you probably look at the contract and you wouldn't think it's FIDIC at all, but that's the way it's set up. Another interesting aspect of the FIDIC document is that, or this contract we have, is claims are encouraged. And it's not that we want to see claims, but the contractor has 28 days to put a claim in. If he doesn't, it's time barred. Don't even talk to me. So it looks like we're going south. Here's a letter. Well, I've got 60 claims right now. I'm 2 years into the project, and we have about 3 more years to go. We expect to have that developed to where we probably have somewhere around 300 to 400 claims on this particular project. Many of them to date, out of 60 that I have right now, about 10 of them have gone away. So that's a little bit about the contract. A little bit about the CH2M Hill contract. We provide program services, but we are also an integrated team with the client. I don't know if you guys know a little bit about that. I have approximately 100 client employees reporting to me directly. So we're very much integrated. It's an English-based contract, but most of my meetings and most of my discussions are all in Spanish. My Spanish is very good, so it does help, but it's an English-based contract because we wanted to get an international flavor around there. So, but the interesting thing, the reason I bring up our contract and the integration part, the integration, if you want to integrate with a client and you're a consultant, you have to understand that it is not easy. It is the most difficult program management team you can put together. And I've been at it for 4 years, and I've learned to adapt, to evolve. If you cannot adapt, evolve, don't bother coming to the program, because you have to adapt to the circumstances, to the culture, to the contract, and you have to evolve with that and learn how to work with that. So it is very, very challenging, not on the technical side, but challenging on the multicultural side, challenging on the interpersonal relationship, and challenging on the fact that you really have an integrated team, but you don't have an integrated team. So it's something we had to work through. The last part I want to say about the contract, and then we'll go into the presentation here, is, do we have any owners here? Any owners? No owners? I'll still behave. The contract we have, and I've never had one before, has consequential damages. So if I give you, the client, wrong advice, consequential damages. If I don't say anything and you go down the wrong path, consequential damages. Okay? So keep that in mind and think about the relationship you will have with your client. If you're sitting there and you're talking about something you may not totally agree, but hey, that's a client, he can do whatever he wants. Not here. So keep that in mind. So it's a unique contract for us, and it keeps us on our toes. And in the beginning, it created a lot of difficulties for us because if we didn't have the usual relationship, we were always, hey, we better put it in writing and everything else. We smoothed those things out, we worked it out, and so, but just an idea of the contract. As I indicated, the project is divided into several projects, 35 of them. The main ones here are we call the PAC. And basically what it is you're just removing stuff. Watch, here's the 3 projects we were talking about. It's a time lapse. You see the Pack 3 was done. This is Pack 4 being implemented. We have the cofferdams that just occurred. We have a really good technology and communication department, if you haven't, when you take a look at this. So, I'll go back one more time. So what happened is in the end, this is what you're going to see on the bridge in the background is the Centennial Bridge. So right now you're looking south. The canal runs north-south. It does not run east-west. And Panama City is on the southern end, and the Atlantic is on the northern end for us. But in the end, you're going to have, what you have here is a larger canal entrance, and it's, as you can see, it's twice the width of the current canal. That's doing it again, so I have a little technical issue here. So anyway, while it goes through the exercise again, we had 3 different contracts, major contracts that actually, this is the northern end of the Pacific locks that we're working. So this all needs to be accomplished prior to our finishing our work. So this is what we call the Pacific access channels. Over here is just another look at, we have 2 major lakes within the Panama Canal. We have the Miraflores Lake, which is actually a very small lake, and we have the Gatun Lake, which is one of the larger lakes. What happens in the current canal right now, you have the entrance at the Pacific, which we call the Miraflores, and it has a 3-step lock system, which takes you up into what we call the Miraflores, and then you up here at the top. I don't know if this thing has a. Doesn't seem to be. At the top, upper right is is the Pedro Miguel, which takes you from the Miraflores up to the Gatun Lake. So there's really 2 steps to get into the major lake that takes you to the Atlantic side. The new locks will not have that. So what you have basically is you have differential water levels, and we put in this what we call the God, I can't think of the name now. It's the Brinken Dam. It's the Brinken Dam. So it separates the 2 lakes, and we're able to eliminate a set of locks. This is the phase 4 of the Pacific Access Channel. It's, again, in front of the locks, and what you'll see here is that we have 35. Here's a little view of the project. The hill to your left, there used to be 2 of them right where the level ground is, so we have moved a tremendous amount of earth. I just got an email, just on the locks project themselves, we've to date have just moved 10 million cubic meters of earth, and we're about 60% done. So we still have a bit of dirt to move.
Where's the dirt going? Where do you put the dirt?
The dirt is actually used, we have what we call disposal sites. And at the disposal sites, we actually have areas designated for these disposals. So actually, we end up building new hills. So there are, if you know a little bit about Panama, Panama is under a major development. There's high rises. I think of Panama as San Diego on steroids. And I won't talk about the infrastructure because it doesn't exist. But it is impressive. I have an apartment in Panama on the 26th floor, and I look out, and all I see is a forest of high rises. It's very impressive. But typically, most of the we have disposal sites, and we basically end up developing new hills. One of the things we do quite a bit, which many folks may not understand, is that there's a lot of dredging. The original Panama area was, we had a river called the Cazares River, and it would just run wild during the rainy seasons, and the amount of sediments and deposits would just fill up any area. So there's a constant dredging operation that goes on annually in the Panama Canal, just taking out the sediments. But here, because the ships that we're going to bring in is the post-Panama ships, and they're very large, and they require greater draft. And so what's happening is one of the projects here is we're having the dredgers come in and take out more of the sediments so that the larger ships can come through. And one of the requirements was we may have to modify that bridge. This is the Puente de Americas, if the ships get any bigger. So what else are we doing in the canal? What you have here is this whole area is being dredged because that's the current channel where we take all the ships. And right now the depth needs to be deepened for the post-Panamax vessels that are quite large, and we're working on that. I'm going to use this as a stopping point to bring up some of the issues we have, and you can see some of the animation. The guy, Marco Villarreal, I'm going to give him credit. He loves to put little things going on to entertain you in case I get boring. So, he had other things. He actually had other things on there, and I told him that if it was more, if he actually had things flying across there and everything else, if you had that, you guys would I would just sit still and you guys can watch everything. So anyway, they do have an incredible shop, but one of the things that this discussion is, where did PMI, Pembroke and all that, how did that work in Panama? Okay. Well, we'll take a break here and talk about processes, okay? And I've heard a discussion on multicultural, okay? So right now I'm going to give you the positive of what we got out of the PMI process and the Pembroke process. It's called processes. I mean, you may have, right now I'm in a room and the conversation is in French, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish, English, Dutch. And there are multiple conversations going on. The main language is English because the Dutch don't speak Spanish and some of the Americans don't speak Spanish, so we have that. Or my French is bad, my Italian is okay, my Spanish is good. So what keeps us all in line? What keeps us going down the right path? Processes, okay? And how does that overcome multicultural things? Well, process. Look, one of the biggest things is in the first year, the integration of our team was like, anybody seen the movie with Michael Douglas and War of the Roses? Okay? That was a better relationship than what we had. And the reason for that is that, I was born and raised in California, and how are we trained? Okay, we get to the point, all right? Okay, no, you don't. How's your family? Oh, they're doing well. Oh, I'm glad to hear it. What'd you do on the weekend? I did that. Oh. Half an hour later, oh, by the way, I have this little issue I want to talk to you about. Oh, what is it? Da-da-da. Okay. Oh, by the way, how's your family doing over here? And so there was a little difference is that was just part of the culture. The other thing is we are more accustomed to be fairly aggressive, okay? And, I go to a meeting and you're talking about executives, board of directors, and I point out something, and after 4 years, I finally learned not to point things out. I do that afterwards, and so face saving is an important process. And what I'm building up to is cultures. They're different cultures, but you have to respect the cultures. Each culture is different. So how did we overcome all of this? By processes. And so we have a project control process for payment application, for looking at schedules. And in that process, we came to consensus. And then you put it down on paper, flow chart. We actually had training classes. We spent some time. We spent a lot of quality time in this process. So now, the first time they presented a payment application to me, I basically got up and left because it was horrendous. The second time, but this is a combined team, so my team and their team, so we finally got to the point now where I'm almost rubber stamping them. I review everything, but the processes have kicked in, the applications have kicked in, and so one of the things, and the classes that UT Dallas gave them, the managers bought into that. In fact, Jim, I forget how many people took the PMI, and it was
30 the first time, and all one passed.
Yeah. So they bought into the system. So when we put the process together, that overcame cultural differences. And so the positive I want to speak to on PMI is that processes. Now, make sure you do a good process. I've seen what happens with bad processes. And we have to, everything needs to be updated. You can't, it's a living document. When you see something's wrong, create it. So one of the key elements we've worked out is you can overcome many, many cultural things if you get everybody buy into a process and you follow the process. And so one of the biggest things we did was we take the executives and we made them buy into the process, and that made everything like a domino for us. So that was one of the most difficult processes we had, was just doing processes. Another unsafe moment brought to you by, it's a challenge. We continually try to bring, the one thing about here is that the Canal de Panama is a quasi-government entity. When the canal was given over to the Panamanians from the U.S., and I will not get into geopolitics or anything else, is that the canal, the whole culture of the canal was based on the Army Corps of Engineers. So you already have what we're accustomed to in the U.S., but they were very much based on the culture of the Army Corps of Engineers. We've come in and we've it helped tremendously on that. And safety is a big issue for us. We constantly are working on that effort. Again, just more reaches on dredging. This is one of the other packs that we're working on. It's, a lot of this excavation, there's a tremendous amount of earth work that's going on. Now we're going to shift over to the Atlantic, and the Atlantic basically has the same activities. Dredging International did the one on the Pacific, and on the Atlantic is Jean Denou, who actually is doing this independent, but they're also part of the consortium. And all this activity is continuing forward. The slides, I did the slides for the dredging people. So they gave me a bad time the last time I did a presentation, and all it was about the locks, and they didn't appreciate that whatsoever. Okay, this is what consumes my life. The third set of locks. I'm going to give you a little bit of data on the third set of locks. The first part is that the contract, as you can see there, says 3.15, but we also have some other elements in there. So it's about $3.3 billion. And I already showed you the consortium and the percentage. But the one thing you should know is the locks themselves. The width of the locks right now is 55 meters across. The length of it is 460 meters. And the depth is 30 meters with a minimum of 18.3 meters of water is the minimum depth we have on there. So they're quite huge. Right now, we use about 61 million gallons of water for every lockage that we push a ship through. And that's with a water-saving basins. Without the water-saving basins, it's 61 million. When we use the water-saving basins, and we'll show you some diagrams here, we actually save over 50% of the water. And in Panama, water is a big deal. The Gatun Lake serves three purposes. It has an environmental impact, but it also supplies the water to the city of Panama. And critically, it supplies the water for all of the movement of the ships through the locks. The other thing too is when we put one of these pulls Panamax ships through, the clearance is 0.3 meters, or about a foot. That's all the clearances you have. If you take a look at the existing one, I don't know how many people have been to Panama lately, but the ships right now, I think it's less than a foot. And they're run by what we call mules, but they're really trains. The new canal will have tugboats, but you only have less than a foot clearance. And it's typically, we can push a ship through within about 2.5 hours. Again, as you could take a look at it, one of the things I wanted to point out was that the volume of excavation dredging, by the time we're done, we're going to push 30 million cubic meters. And we can't put it all on land. We actually have some ocean approved, environmentally approved ocean dump sites that we can use for eliminating the materials here. Now here's where we play with a little graphics. You have 3 water-saving basins for each chamber, and each water-saving basin has 3 elements to it. And as you can see, how the gates and the hydraulics work to minimize, to recycle the water they use on this process. There's other stuff in here, but it made me dizzy, so I didn't put it in there.
So as the ships come through, of course, the larger they are, the more water that will overflow, and then that water is brought back in.
Actually, not. There's the buoyancy. So we're actually, to us, the smaller ships give us the biggest problems.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So this is the ship going in this direction. Here is lifting the ships going the other direction. So from the ocean sides, the ships are lifted up to go to the lakes, and they cross the lake. Lockage to lockage is about 50 miles apart. So the Gatun Lake is almost over 40 miles in length. So it's quite a huge one. And so that is the plan, to be able to use or recycle the water that we have here. And it's actually a major requirement for us to ensure that we use less water than the current canal.
Even with it being expanded?
I'm sorry?
Even while you're expanding?
Absolutely, absolutely. The environmental requirements on us on the Panama Canal is very similar to the U.S., if not stricter in some areas. One of the things that we have a board of directors that likes to see reports on a regular basis, and they don't like to see graphs only. They don't want explanation. So we presented them a 3D graphics of how the progress of the concrete. So we color code everything, and no, we're not there yet, but this provides the board of directors a place to look at. Here's a plan view. The yellow is lean concrete, the blue is concrete, and the red is forms and rebar ready. And so the board of directors are they're very helpful. They like to be giving us advice on a regular basis. So So I'm very grateful for a lot of the support I received. So I take that. Okay. The other thing is, as you can see here, we've only barely started on that, and so the first question is why? And I said, well, we started. And he says, well, why aren't you doing more? He said, can I report back to you in a month? He says, well, I want to see more. I says, okay. So we gave him this. And he says, well, what does that mean? And I said, more. And there was no other question, so that was really good. So, and I did this one also, and as you can see, it's reinforced concrete, but the only thing that was placed was the little green thing. And, I went really quick with the slide, and he said, wow, that's impressive. So anyway, we do have a session on dealing with board of directors, and I think that's at 3:30 or something like that. So, but one thing for folks to understand is it actually has been very helpful in board management. They're very, like I said, our board, their reputation, their families, their livelihood is intimately tied to the success of the canal progress. So if you can think about it, is your reputation, your future is intimately tied to the progress, to how well it does. And so you have to give them a little slack when they call you up at 9 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock at night, or 3 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, I'm really concerned about this, give me some details. They have a lot at stake. I'm a consultant. I can wake up one day and go home. They cannot, okay? And so you have to appreciate, you really have to understand your shareholders. You really have to understand what is it that motivates them, what is it that drives them, what is it that really is that. And so it's very important. So I can't say that was the first thing I figured out, but as time went on, it was something that I began to appreciate, that you need to understand your stakeholders, very much so. Here is the Atlantic. If you take a look at the Atlantic site, the formation is, I don't know if I have any geologists here. Anybody? Any geologists? Good. Okay, so if I don't know what I'm talking about, nobody knows. Okay. So I'm a civil engineer, by the way, and I went to Berkeley. Yay, Bears? Any Bears? Okay, never mind. What looks like concrete out there is actually what we call the Gatun Formation. It cuts like, you could cut it, you can do many things with it, and it acts almost like concrete, but more of a softer version of the concrete. When it rains, it's slicker than snot. I mean, it has presented we use 777s in the beginning to haul the material out, and we developed huge haul roads using the Gatun Formation. But we had to abandon that, or the contractor had to abandon that, because the wheel-based loading from the 777s would just mire into the Gatun haul roads and would sink.
Is it
So,
man-made or is it?
what's that?
Is it man-made?
This what you're seeing here?
Yeah.
On the Atlantic side, the 1939 excavation prior to World War II, the Army Corps of Engineers had begun excavation. This is, 5 times what they had originally, but they had dug the initial trench, and we just went in there and worked on it.
What looks like concrete.
No, that wasn't there. That's all work that we've done on there. And that's the interesting thing about it. It does look like concrete, but we're now using 740s because we can actually, the wheelbase is supported by the Gatun Formation out there. And the one thing that we want to bring up is another sponsor note here. One of the things we have is that the Pacific side of our project is being managed by the 48% shareholders of the consortium in Brazil, an Italian firm. The Atlantic is being managed by the other 48% partner, which is Cazares. They're nothing identical to the projects. It's like 2 different projects. And so for about 2 years, my biggest fight is consistency. And consistency. We only have one project, one contract. I mean, there's only one contract. You can't have 2 different things going on. So we have now, I've made some changes, and we now have consistency. I've taken the folks from the Atlantic, I put them in the Pacific. I've taken people from the Pacific and put them over there. So consistency is very important on a project, especially when you're 50 miles apart and you have basically 2 different companies operating. But we only have one contract. So that was one of the major challenges that we had on this thing.
How did that create consistency?
This is a helicopter view of we're looking north on the Atlantic. I'm sorry, what was your question?
How did they create consistency by moving them from the Pacific to the Atlantic and vice versa?
Well, what happened was that we developed the processes. They're identical processes, but just like anything else, the processes were implemented differently. Okay, so what may have been important on one side may not have been important on the other side. So with the changes, we actually were able to get the teams to realize what each side was doing, come together, and they have now one consistent format. It was not an easy process.
So they both understand.
Yes. When I go back, the guy that moved from the Atlantic to the Pacific doesn't know this yet, but he ain't moving. So he's not going to be happy with me. But anyway, so you can see here, looking north is the Atlantic, and we're just barely coming out of the ground. This is, again, the Atlantic. You're looking at the cross-unders. You're looking at, right there is where the gates are going to go. And so these helicopter shots are being taken every week. The client is very big on historical documentation. We have, I mean, there are more pictures of me in one day than my mother took when I was a baby. So, and I don't like cameras to begin with. So anyway, one of the things they do is in the middle of a meeting, they'll come in, photograph us, and then they leave. So, you know, it's an interesting project. Every 6 months I have to give an interview for historical purposes. So that's usually an hour interview. And they ask me questions that are very direct and even ask me questions of my opinions of people around me. So it's hopefully it is 10 years, like they say, it doesn't show up. So this is we're looking south now. This part down here was part of the original excavation that was done by the U.S. in 1939. To the right, what you don't see right now, but to the right, all the way to where that road is up on the upper right part of the picture, is the water saving basins. And the excavation is only half as wide as it's going to be. So quite a bit of activity going in. Here's something that it's an observation deck that's being built on the Atlantic side, so that we have so many requests for visitors to come out and watch things that the idea came up with, well, we'll build this and we'll charge them. So there's another revenue source here. I can't come up with a PMI example on this one, but you know, this was quite an interesting development here.
So there are no tax dollars at work?
No, actually. The canal generates, after operational costs and after everything else, they generate almost $1 billion that they present to the government of Panama. And so the government of Panama is not allowed to be involved in any of the operational aspects of the canal. The Canal de Panama is almost a standalone, but it is part of the government. This is the Pacific side. You're looking north, and you're looking at the excavation on your left, and the one on the right is a 1939 excavation that was done by the U.S. And that will be filled. The alignment doesn't work for us because we're going to bypass the Pedro Miguel locks, and so this gives us a direct access and eliminates one of the lockets. One of the things we have here logistically is that all of the basalt is found in the Pacific side. So on the Pacific side, there's drilling and blasting because it's basalt. On the Atlantic side, it's just cutting and scraping because it's mostly muck. All of the aggregates that are going to be used on the Atlantic has to be barged, so we built a little barge facility to take it from the Pacific to the Atlantic side. And it has to traverse the 40 miles to get there. These are about 8-ton barges that move twice a day to the site. The last item I have here is, because of the amount of water that you have 2 canal systems now, so they're going to raise the level of the Gatun. And for anybody who's a hydraulic dams engineer, I actually stuck this up for you. I don't really care, but you know, it's there for you guys if you're interested. It's actually an interesting project, is raising all the gates, all the levels, so that the water level will be raised, I think less than a meter. So, anyway, that is the Panama Canal in a short little phrase there. It is a very impressive project. I'm very proud to be part of it, and that it has been a challenge, and I think that the challenges that have been most for us has never been technical. It's been cultural, it has been personal, and so when someone comes to me and says they want to be on the Panama Canal, If you don't have personal skills or social skills, I'm not interested in chatting with you, because it's all about people. It really is all about people. Thank you.
Questions? What are your questions? A world of big, massive projects.
Did you bring in some outside advisors on big mega projects like this? I know when they did the Channel Tunnel, they had an advisory team that was at a pretty high level. Did external advisory team?
Well, what happened for us was that the minimum requirement to be on the C.H. Tom Hill team is I was actually brought in from outside to be part of the C.H. Tom Hill team. But if you want my position, you have to have over $10 billion of experience in design build, international, and you also have to have 25 years of experience, a civil engineering degree, and you also have to have experience in doing not only design build, but international projects using other contracts and other forms of the mat. I have, as a construction manager, I have two project managers on each site. Each one of them has 35 years of experience. Each one of them has done at least $5 billion worth of experience on international design build projects. So that's how we actually ended up with the team. I would have done it differently because it's taken us 4 years to develop the chemistry, because I've got a lot of cowboys and a lot of leaders, and to develop them into a team. We have a team now, but that was the process. So, but we also do have outside advisors. We have experts in concrete, we have experts in hydraulics, we have model experts in Europe. So we do have a contingent of many, many experts throughout the world, but mostly it's the team we put together.
So, are you actually going to operate 2 canals now? So, or does this expansion connect with the other canal, the original canal?
The original canal has 2 sets of locks for each location. There's 3 locations: Miraflores in the Pacific, the Pedro Miguel, and then in the Atlantic we call the Gatun. And so you're able to pass 2 ships. You have 2 lanes. And what will happen with the new canal is it actually will be able to add to that, and there's 2 reasons for that: to increase capacity. The canal has about reached capacity at this time. So in order to continue growing and expanding their commercial side, they need to increase the amount of throughput they can put. The other thing is the canal will be 100 years old on 2014. It needs to come down. They need to take a lane out for services, and I mean extensive services. And so now you still have the 2 capacities, and that was the other reason behind that.
One other question. You said that the government can't be part of operating it?
That's
And that's going forward as well? So who operates it?
The Canal de Panama. It's like, I don't know what, it's like, let's take the Department of Transportation, Texas Department of Transportation, and let's say all they had to do with the state of Texas was to give them money at the end from revenues. But what happens here is part of the agreement in getting the canal over was that the Canal de Panama remain isolated per se from the influences or tampering from the Panamanian government. And so they basically are their own entity, but they're required they are required to get approval for budgets at the assembly, and they're also required to get approval for capital expenses, but they cannot be involved in the day-to-day operations or anything part of the canal. That was part of the agreement.
I don't know back here.
What's the average cost for a vessel to move through the canal?
Well, it depends. If you're Steve Jobs, that's a different story, but the reason I bring up Steve is typically you have somewhere between $350,000 to $400,000 per ship to put one through, okay? The other thing is you can also get in front of the line. And we were there one day and Steve Jobs brought in his yacht, which is almost as big as one of these ships. And he didn't want to wait. And so what the canal has done, which is quite innovative, is they have a lottery system. Well, it's not a lottery system, it's just whoever has the most highest bid. So Steve had to pay $350,000 just to cross the canal. Then he paid another $150,000 to be in the front of the line. So there's half a $500,000 just to be in front of the line. And so the canal does generate, after all costs and everything else, almost $1 billion that all goes to the people of Panama.
So there's not I guess an authority body that, when they, they need approval for budget to make, do maintenance, what have you, who approves that?
Do I?
No, who approves it?
Oh, what happens is every year there's a budget that's put together. The budget year starts in October 1st. Yeah, what happens is the canal, the administrator puts a budget together, presents it to the board of directors that is the ACP or the Canal de Panama Board of Directors. They approve it, and then it goes to the Panama Assembly. So it's like going to Congress and getting it approved. So they have to go through that process.
Who elects the board of directors?
Wow. I'd like to know that too, but anyway. Jim knows some stories about me and the board of directors, and I'm always surprised I'm still employed at the canal project. But anyway, what happens is that the members are selected. They each have like a 3-year, so there's 11 members to the board. One member is picked by the chairman of the board is picked by the president. So the president always picks the chairman of the ACP board. And then there's, every year, 3 members are come off, and so they stagger them. So you always have this board thing. And usually they're determined by the assembly, and so you have one party picks that, or one portion of the groups, and then you have an independent. So it's kind of, it was tried to be fairly safe, and it's not like Congress in the 12, where you have the ideology that's already fixed, but they try to do that. But they actually do a pretty good job of trying to separate it. But most of them are very distinguished. 2 of them that are on the board were presidents of Panama, so it's a pretty distinguished group. I mean, it's very distinguished.
On this project, how are the working conditions there, and the weather and all that stuff these days? I've seen documentaries on the original canal. You were talking about safety issues. I've seen documentaries on the working condition. The number of people died and all that now. How are things today?
Yeah, in the past, 26,000 people died from malaria, from unsafe, not malaria, but yellow fever. And dengue, also. Dengue has made a comeback recently, but and in very unsafe conditions. Right now, Panama has 2 seasons. We call it the wet season and the dry season. And the dry season right now runs typically from mid-December to about mid-April. Okay, and that's when it's like here, right now in Texas, but with a breeze. Okay, that's kind of what you have for those 4 months. An occasional rain will come in. The other period is where it comes in and rains anywhere from, usually you can set your clock between 2 and 3 and rains for about an hour, but it's like someone just poured a bucket on you. I mean, I can't walk from here to you without being soaked. It just comes down, and it rains every day. And it varies from, just an hour to the whole day. So as far as the working conditions, most of the health issues dealing with the mosquitoes are not an issue. Our biggest challenge is trying to keep people safe. And the culture is not one of safety. But if you get someone dies, you shut down the whole project, so you also have a production issue. But it's a challenge for us on a daily basis.
You've mentioned the challenges that you have culturally as well as dealing with issues related around safety. What was the biggest unknown challenge that has cropped up from the trying to change what was done back in 1939 to what you're trying to get to today that surprised you?
Well, what surprised me is I'm U.S. educated at a major university. Most of the people I work with in Panama are all U.S. educated. LSU, Cornell, Stanford, Berkeley, Texas A&M, masters, PhDs. I mean, they're an impressive group. And so we just thought, hey, we come together, you got an Army Corps base. The biggest surprise to me was that we had such cultural differences, even though they had the same education and they spoke English, and Panama Canal at one time was all run by the U.S. That was shocking to me that cultural difference was there. And the other part that was a little bit shocking to me was that being right is not the priority. And so that was very difficult. I mean, it's, agreeing, or how do you present yourself, or how do you present an answer? I was talking to someone about that where, if the administrator would say, Joe, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And he does that. I mean, he gets up there, and I mean, I'm ready to stand up and salute or whatever. He's really jazzed. He's got everything going. And he's dead wrong. I mean, absolutely dead wrong. And I'm the old bobblehead. Hey, all right. And then afterwards, I go fix it. And because before, the first 2 years, I would say, hey, you're wrong. We got to do it this way. Whew. I get a phone call from the president of my company. I get a phone call from the CEO of my company. Knock it off. So the whole problem is I don't compromise. I never have. But I've learned how to work within the system. We still do what is right, but there's a venue and a place for it. And that was one of the most valuable lessons. In the U.S., you can be direct and forthcoming. Here, it's a dance, and the dance may last a week, may last a month, but it's a dance, and you eventually get what you need done. But that was a very painful lesson for me. And I've been at this project for over 4 years, and I would have to say is I finally got it the last 6 months. So.
What kind of technical issues are you having for big? I know over here it's Green Street on the highway, they did a tunnel across the highway, and it was a major nightmare. The convention building is a huge hole.
Well, basically what we're building is a big swimming pool, with some dam. The gates are basically dams. So, but the technical issues we have is, which is very complex sometimes, is the hawser forces on ships, because you have these large ships and you have water rushing in. You got quite a bit of water rushing in. So it has hawser forces. So we actually built a model, a scaled model that's larger than this room, twice the size. And we actually looked into the hawser forces and everything else. So the hydraulics on this thing was incredibly, very high technical aspects of it. And we had experts from around the world working with our modeling and everything else. We developed a 3D model, then we developed a physical model. The contractor had to develop a 3D model, get us to approve it. Then he had to build the physical model to prove to us that his 3D model was. So from my aspect, the technical aspects of hydraulics drove this thing. And I have to stand up when they talk because I can't, I'm just way over my head. So it just, and then the other part is the logistics of the, all of the, what do you call it, the processing that needs to go in for moving ships and everything else, the electronics and the brains and everything else, the interfaces with the rock wells, with the other aspects of it. So that's where the technical part's issue. The rest of it is you're digging a hole, you're building concrete. It's not rocket science.
You have erosion control issues?
Significant. Especially on the Atlantic side, when it rains, everything washes away. So, that's a big, significant issue. Got a gentleman in the back.
Okay. One question. Have you done any further seismic analysis of the area? Because earthquake faults are not far away from the ocean. has that been done? Because you have major structures up there that are subject to tremendous water pressure.
Okay, you want the politically correct answer, or you want the truth? Okay. You are correct. If you take a look at the Panama state, the Panama is is crooked, okay? Because what you have is the forces coming in. So we have, what we have is a major fault, and I use this because to me, there was not enough evidence to classify it as a major fault. I was involved in trying to resolve the issues between our geotech group and experts and our non-geotech group, and there was a huge clash because we were coming up on this side with seismic criteria that even in California, where I'm from, we wouldn't even use. I mean, the requirements were incredible. And on the other side, we don't have any earthquakes in Panama, okay? And so that was a huge debate. It took me 3 months facilitating that to come to a compromise that we could actually use. I would say that a significant costs were added to this overall program because of the seismic criteria and the accelerations we're using on this project would make California proud. And so on the Pacific side is where the fault is, and on that side is we have reinforcement steel that, I mean, it's pretty difficult to put concrete in some of those areas. So that's one of our logistical problems is we have an extensive amount of reinforcement on the Pacific side. Atlantic side is not so bad. The second part of your question was we have these high rises in Panama, 0.15 Gs. I mean, you know, very small acceleration requirements on there. So if we ever get the earthquake that they predict, you know, we're done. So, but the canal will stay.
Thank you, Joe.
Complex element left out of this project. You got political things, you got culture things, you got dirt things and water things and hydraulic things. What's missing?
Well, just about everything, but we were talking about that earlier, is the biggest impact to us right now is the politics from the global, we're no one can be isolated anymore. So what happens in Italy and Spain impacts the contractor, which impacts us. So, you know, there's ramifications, but we got it all. You want politics, we got it all. You want intrigue, we got it all. You want everything else, we got it all. So
that's why, listen, this will hold a mild tranquilizer, which I'm sure you need, but let me make a recommendation.
okay.
See your physician and have him give you a prescription for something a bit stronger than that.